There are still places on Earth protected by armed patrols, sealed behind religious law, buried beneath ice, or locked inside mountains where the public will never be allowed to step. Some are forbidden because they are sacred, some because they are lethal, and some because whatever is hidden inside is considered too dangerous, too valuable, or too revealing to be seen by ordinary eyes. This is our countdown of the 10 most forbidden places you will never be allowed to visit. Stay with us to the end, because number 1 may be the most heavily guarded mystery on this list, a place that has kept part of its truth hidden for more than 1,000 years. Number 10. Area 51, Nevada, United States. There is a place in the Nevada desert that the United States government denied existed for decades. Not classified, not restricted, denied. The facility sits inside a dry lake bed called Groom Lake, deep within the Nevada Test and Training Range, surrounded by roughly 2.5 million acres of restricted airspace. The nearest public road ends at a cattle grid, with warning signs that carry a message most government signage does not bother with. The use of deadly force is authorized. The base became public knowledge not through any official disclosure, but through the testimony of engineers and pilots who worked there, and through satellite imagery that governments could no longer suppress once commercial satellites made it available to anyone with an internet connection. The CIA formally acknowledged the facility's existence only in 2013, in a declassified history that confirmed it had been used to develop and test aircraft, including the U-2 spy plane and the SR-71 Blackbird. Technologies so far ahead of their time that civilian witnesses who spotted them in the sky were told they had seen weather phenomena, or swamp gas. What the declassified record does not address is the period from the late 1980s onward, when accounts from former employees began describing technologies and projects that no official document has ever confirmed. The perimeter is patrolled by private military contractors, monitored by motion sensors, and enforced by low-flying helicopters that track anyone approaching the boundary on foot. The airspace above it is among the most restricted on the planet. What is tested inside that perimeter today remains one of the most carefully guarded secrets in modern military history, and the government has shown no interest in changing that. Number 9. The underground tunnels of Abusir, Egypt. Most people have heard of Giza. Far fewer have heard of Abusir, a royal necropolis sitting roughly 15 miles to the south, where a cluster of crumbling Old Kingdom pyramids has stood largely undisturbed since the 5th dynasty, around 4,500 years ago. The pyramids themselves are accessible. What lies beneath them is not. In the 1990s, Egyptian archaeologists and later international survey teams using ground-penetrating radar began detecting something unexpected below the Abusir Plateau, an extensive network of tunnels, chambers, and shafts running deep into the bedrock, far beyond the known burial architecture of the pyramids above. The scale of what the scans suggested was significant enough that access to certain areas was quietly restricted while assessments continued. Some of those restrictions have never been lifted. Local workers and archaeologists who have descended into sections of the upper tunnel system describe passages that branch and descend in directions inconsistent with standard tomb design, corridors that widen into chambers, then narrow again, then drop without any clear architectural purpose that matches anything else in the Egyptian record. There are accounts, circulated among Egyptologists for decades, of inscriptions and structural features in the deeper sections that have not been formally published. Some researchers have speculated, cautiously, that portions of the network may predate the pyramids built above them. The Egyptian authorities have not confirmed the full extent of what the surveys found. Active excavation in certain zones has been halted without public explanation, and independent access is not permitted. Whether what lies beneath Abusir is an undocumented burial complex, an older system of unknown origin, or something else entirely, the ground has not yet given up its full answer, and for now, no one outside a tightly controlled circle is being allowed to ask. Number 8. Pluto's Gate, Turkey. Ancient civilizations did not choose their sacred sites randomly. They were watching the world carefully, and sometimes what they recorded as supernatural had a very precise physical explanation. Pluto's gate, in the ruins of the ancient city of Hierapolis in modern-day Turkey, was described by Greek and Roman writers as a portal to the underworld. Animals placed near its entrance would collapse and die within minutes. Priests claimed that only the spiritually purified could pass through and return alive. For centuries, these accounts were dismissed as myth. Then, scientists measured the air. The cave sits above a geological fault line that vents carbon dioxide continuously through cracks in the rock. Because carbon dioxide is heavier than air, it doesn't disperse. It pools at ground level, creating an invisible, suffocating layer with no color and no smell. Any creature breathing at that level loses consciousness in minutes. The concentrations peak at night and in the early morning, which is exactly when the ancient rituals took place. The priests who survived were tall enough to breathe above the gas. The animals placed at their feet were not. The legend was never fiction. It was observation without the vocabulary to explain it. Today, the area is fenced off and visitors are kept away. The ancient world understood something dangerous was there. They simply called it by a different name. Number 7. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault, Norway. Deep inside a mountain on the Norwegian island of Spitsbergen, 810 miles from the North Pole, there is a tunnel running 430 feet into permanently frozen rock. At the end of it, behind blast-proof doors, sits what scientists describe as the most important insurance policy the human species has ever built. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault was constructed around one question: what happens if the world's agriculture collapses? If the crops that feed 8 billion people stop growing, the seeds stored here are the answer. The vault holds more than 1.3 million samples from almost every country on Earth, including ancient varieties no longer farmed and wild plants carrying genetic material that may resist diseases and droughts we haven't encountered yet. The public cannot enter. Even the nations that deposited seeds can only withdraw them under genuine emergency conditions. The first withdrawal happened in 2015 to replace collections destroyed by the war in Syria. But the vault has already faced a threat it wasn't designed for. In 2017, warming temperatures caused the permafrost around the entrance tunnel to thaw, and water began seeping in. No seeds were harmed, but a $20 million reinforcement project followed immediately. The institution built to protect us from catastrophe is already being tested by one. Number 6. Bohemian Switzerland, Czech Republic. In the northwestern corner of the Czech Republic, a landscape of sculpted sandstone called Bohemian Switzerland contains what was once one of the most visited natural attractions on the continent. Pravčická Brana is a natural stone arch standing 52 feet tall with a span of 87 feet, the largest of its kind in Europe. For decades, visitors walked across the top of it. Open air on both sides, unobstructed views for miles in every direction. Then, engineers began measuring what those footsteps were actually doing to the rock. Sandstone is soft. It absorbs moisture, compresses under weight, and sheds material with every contact. The rate of erosion was accelerating beyond what natural weathering alone could produce. In 1982, authorities permanently banned anyone from touching the arch. It can still be viewed from platforms below, and since the ban, the erosion rate has slowed. But that is not a solution. It is a delay. Pravčická Brana is still wearing away, year by year, and one day it will fall. The closure didn't save it forever, it only bought it more time. If you're enjoying this video, hit subscribe and the notification bell right now, because the top 5 on this list are in a completely different category. Number 5. The Grand Shrine of Ise, Japan. Across Japan, there are roughly 80,000 Shinto shrines, and nearly all of them welcome visitors. The Grand Shrine of Ise in Mie Prefecture is not like those shrines. Built to honor Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun, it is considered the single most sacred site in all of Shinto. The only people permitted inside the inner sanctum are Shinto priests and members of the Japanese imperial family. Everyone else is stopped at the wooden fence surrounding it. What makes Ise stranger than its access restrictions is what happens to the buildings. Every 20 years, without exception, the entire complex is demolished and rebuilt from scratch. The same traditional joinery techniques have been passed from craftsman to craftsman since the 7th century. Not a single nail is used. When the new structure is complete, the pieces of the old one are distributed to shrines across Japan as sacred material. The cycle has not been interrupted once in over 2,000 years. You can walk the forested grounds, you can stand on the ornamental paths, but what sits behind those barriers has been invisible to ordinary eyes for longer than most of the world's nations have existed. Number 4. Movile Cave, Romania. In 1986, workers surveying ground for a power plant near the city of Mangalia in southeastern Romania broke through a thin layer of rock and found something that had been completely sealed from the outside world for approximately 5.5 million years. What was inside would force scientists to revise their assumptions about the conditions under which life is possible. The air in Movile Cave contains dangerous concentrations of hydrogen sulfide and methane and holds only about half the oxygen in normal air. Descending into it requires breathing equipment and a 65-foot drop through a narrow vertical shaft into total darkness. Fewer than 100 people have ever been permitted inside. Each one required specific authorization and arrived in gear designed to prevent them from introducing any outside biological material, because what the cave contains is irreplaceable. Cut off from sunlight for millions of years, the ecosystem inside runs entirely on chemosynthesis. Microorganisms extract energy from chemical reactions in the sulfur compounds and methane in the rock. Those microbes feed 48 species of animals found nowhere else on Earth. Blind water scorpions, translucent leeches, and insects with antennae so elongated they function as navigational instruments in complete, permanent darkness. Nothing in that cave has had contact with the surface world since before modern humans existed. NASA studies it as the closest analog on Earth to conditions believed to exist beneath the ice of Jupiter's moon Europa. One contaminating bacterium from a single careless visitor could destroy an ecosystem that took millions of years to build. Number 3. Mount Yamantau, Russia. In the southern Ural Mountains of Russia, approximately 930 miles east of Moscow, there is a peak called Mount Yamantau. At 5,381 feet, it is the tallest point in the southern Urals. And since the 1980s, it has been the subject of speculation that no official statement has ever resolved. Satellite imagery shows roads, buildings, and installations surrounding the mountain with no identifiable civilian function. Construction began inside the mountain during the Cold War and kept accelerating even after the Soviet Union collapsed, even through the economic crisis of the 1990s when Russia could barely fund basic infrastructure. The work at Yamantau continued. The area is completely closed to the public. Military checkpoints ring the perimeter, and armed patrols operate beyond them. When foreign officials have pressed the Russian government for answers, the explanations have contradicted each other. A mining site, a food storage depot, a nuclear bunker. Western intelligence analysts believe the most likely truth is a massive underground command center designed to keep functioning during and after a nuclear exchange. A facility from which Russia could continue to operate if Moscow no longer existed. Whatever is inside that mountain, the Russian government has no intention of saying, and approaching the perimeter without authorization is not an administrative error. It is a military one. Number 2. Lake Vostok, Antarctica. Buried under more than 2 miles of ice in eastern Antarctica, 800 miles from the South Pole, there is a body of water roughly the size of Lake Ontario that has been completely cut off from the rest of the world for somewhere between 15 and 25 million years. The Russian research station sitting directly above it has recorded surface temperatures of -128 degrees Fahrenheit, the coldest air temperature ever measured on Earth. For months at a time, there is no sunlight at all. Scientists first detected the lake using radar in the 1970s, but reaching it without contamination was one of the most demanding problems in the history of exploration. The challenge wasn't just drilling through 2 miles of ice. It was doing it without introducing a single organism from the surface into water that had been untouched for millions of years. Russian researchers finally broke through to the liquid surface in 2012. Only a handful of samples have been collected, and even those remain disputed. If microbial life evolved in that lake, in complete isolation, under permanent darkness and crushing pressure, The conditions are nearly identical to what scientists believe exists beneath the ice of several moons in the outer solar system. If life works in Lake Vostok, the implications for life elsewhere are not theoretical. They are direct. For everyone outside a handful of authorized researchers, what lives under that ice will remain unknown. Number 1. The Vatican Apostolic Archive, Vatican City. And now we reach the most restricted collection of documents in the world. Inside the walls of Vatican City, the Vatican Apostolic Archive holds approximately 53 miles of shelving containing records that span the entire history of the Catholic Church. And through it, a significant portion of the history of Western civilization. Letters between popes and kings, records of every papal election for over 1,000 years, treaties that redrew the borders of nations, and buried somewhere in those 53 miles, materials that no member of the public has ever been permitted to see. Access was partially opened to credentialed scholars in 1881, but the conditions are severe. Researchers must hold recognized academic credentials, request specific documents in advance, and cannot browse freely. They are supervised in reading rooms and never allowed into the actual storage areas. Following a decision by Pope Francis in 2020, records up to 1958 are now accessible, but everything after that date remains sealed. Among the known documents are the 1521 papal decree that excommunicated Martin Luther, personal letters written by Michelangelo, and the complete records of Galileo's trial by the Inquisition, the full account of what was said in the room where one of history's greatest scientists was forced to publicly deny what he had proven. But it is the contents nobody has seen that carry the most weight. What correspondence, what confessions, what decisions fill the shelves beyond 1958? The Vatican has not said, and the pattern of the last 12 centuries suggests it probably never will. Those are the 10 most forbidden places you will never be allowed to visit. Which one got to you the most? Drop it in the comments. From a military base in the Nevada desert that the US government denied existed for decades, to a network of ancient tunnels beneath the Egyptian plateau that no one has been allowed to fully explore, to 53 miles of shelving in Vatican City, where the record of 12 centuries of human power sits behind a door that almost no one will ever open. Every one of these places exists right now, and every one of them is proof that no matter how thoroughly we think we have mapped this planet, there are still places that are simply inaccessible for us. If you made it this far, you already know this channel is for you. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and we will see you in the next one.